There's also basketball to talk about. We got to talk a little bit about hoops, and we have a lot of things. So let's start with basketball as we bring in Al Hood from SB Nation, who can do both basketball, Tar Heel blog, and hockey, Canes Country, whatever I just said. So real quick, coming out of the Carolina win over NC State, other than, it was a win. Do we just move on? What do we take out of it?
You know, it's a little bit different, Adam, because for the first time in several games, I mean, you'd argue since the SMU game at home, it looked like the team on the court actually had fun playing basketball. There was communication. There was building momentum. They employed the press a lot more than you had seen in the last few games. They're intangible things that we hadn't seen from this Tar Heel team for a while now, and that's the thing to take off of it. Yes, State didn't show up, and yes, State's just having a bad year, but sometimes these little things, you never know when you're going to hit a fork in the road moment where you all of a sudden you realize, okay, yeah, we actually can play together. Oh yeah, we can actually hit these shots. And it was good to see them actually respond to the crowd that showed up and looking for something on Wednesday night. That the free crowd that showed up for the Snow game was there booing them, and they felt like it was important for them to actually show up and perform for them. So that they're intangibles that they can take to Virginia tomorrow, another home game. And then, you know, you start building some wins together, and then you start thinking, okay, maybe the season isn't so much of a lost season as we thought it was going to be. Because for a while, it definitely looked like it was just spiraling out of control.
All right, so Al Hood is joining us here for the time being. Tar Heel blog, Al Hood, at Al B Hood on Twitter, and Blue Sky, by the way. The way I look at it, and in terms of North Carolina big picture, is that if they were to win all of their remaining games other than the Duke game and win twice at the ACC tournament, I think that would be enough to give them a very good chance to make the NCAA tournament. Better than 50-50, like 60-40, 70-30 chance of sneaking in the at-large pool. If they were to ultimately end up the season, I think it would be 22-12 overall. If they could get to that, even though they wouldn't have they might have 2 quad one wins at that point because they would lose to Duke. And I believe that if they won twice at the ACC tournament, one of those would ultimately be a quad one game. Do you think that that's enough, or do they still have to beat Duke?
I mean, I think that the fact that a big difference between this year and a couple of years ago when they were in a very similar situation is that a game that they were counting on in Madison Square Garden is going to stay as a quad one game. They were in this situation 2 years ago. They beat Ohio State, and they were kind of counting on that to be a quad one game, and Ohio State just flatlined. And
right.
So they just had nothing to fall back on. This time around, UCLA, while they're out of the top 25, they've held their own in the Big Ten. They played a little bit better lately. There's no reason why that game won't stay as a quad one. So they at least have they at least have the hard schedule. They at least have a win in the quad one. They at least have close losses to be able to fall back on. And you know, it does create a situation where if this happens, you can say, well, look at I know it's not an official metric, but you can say, look at their last 10. They're playing better. They seem to have figured something out. Especially in this new age of college basketball, you do have to consider how a team is playing at the end of the year because so many of these teams are thrown together in the off season. It takes time to build chemistry. If you've got a team that looks like that they are actually figuring things out, if they're actually winning the games that they're supposed to be doing, they've shown that they've got the ability to play well against an NCAA tournament team. And then you put them in that postseason scenario where it's win or go home, and they actually show that they have the fight to be able to perform in those situations against similarly matched teams that you would put them up against in an at-large scenario, then yeah, I think their argument for getting to the tournament would be high, especially considering how Duke has just continued to just steamroll the rest of the league. I mean, Clemson has been their only blemish, and they've recovered amazingly from that. So I think to some extent, a bad loss against Duke and Cameron, if Carolina can keep it close in Chapel Hill, it's tough to look at that. It would be tough to look at that blowout loss as a bad mark against them.
All right, before we have to say goodbye to Al Hood at Al B. Hood, now we're going to flip to Canes Country, staff writer there. Obviously, the big takeaway for us as Hurricanes fans was, all right, stop it already with Jacob Slavin. Enough. He's not going home with you. PK Subban and Mark Messier and everybody else on set. That was the Jacob Slavin masterclass, though.
Yeah, it really was. And as you so adeptly pointed out last night, the game-winning goal from McDavid came on the icing call.
Yep.
And why was Connor McDavid able to get so wide open in the slot off of that icing call? Because John Cooper, who has won cups for a reason, recognized that for once Jacob Slavin was not going to be on the ice at the same time as Connor McDavid, and was able to get that line out there, and it paid immediate dividends. Like you not only were they highlighting, not only could you just see with your own eyes how good Slavin was when he was on the ice, you saw immediately how much of a difference he made when he was off the ice.
Yep.
The fact that the Canes have somehow signed him to the extension, have him for just $6.4 million. I've got old friends in Boston who are telling me anecdotally about people who are essentially learning about him for the first time, and they're asking, "Hey, when is his contract up? Like, when can he be a free agent?" And he can just smile and say, "You're not getting him."
Nope.
So, I was hoping, if you're a Canes fan, this Four Nations was probably in a lot of ways the best thing that you could have asked for. A guy who is consistently underrated finally got the attention that he deserves, and they can finally stop talking about how underrated he is when you get to a playoff format. Seth Jarvis became a media darling, even though he was a healthy scratch on one night. He became a media darling out there.
Yeah.
Rantanen seemed to have found his form by the end of it. The only person who struggled was Aho, and I have my disagreements with how the Finnish coach used Aho in that tournament format, but with so few games, any sort of mistake in usage is going to be magnified. But I think as Canes fans, you should be very happy with how the team was represented in the Four Nations.
Oh, absolutely, especially since, by all accounts, Slavin was the best player for the United States. Mm-hmm. With all respect to Brady Tkachuk, who was awesome and eye-opening for a lot of people. Al Hood, at Al B. Hood, Tar Heel Blog, and Canes Country. We hit on both. Sir, enjoy. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Adam. Thank you so much.